Dad, where have you been? I was so worried.
Go away. Don't touch me.
I froze on the spot, not understanding why my once kind-hearted father was being so cold toward me. I snapped out of my daze and tried helping him forward, but he flinched me away. My eyes started to tear up, and I didn't know what to do. Then another woman appeared. She quickly helped him up and smiled at me. Don't worry, sweetie. I'll take care of him. Excuse me? Who was she? My mother had barely been put in the ground, and Dad had already moved on? I couldn't watch any more of this, so I quickly left the room. How could things go downhill this quickly? My life used to be so simple and perfect. I had a loving family. I was always on top at school. People always complimented me on how I inherited both the beauty and intelligence of my mom and dad. But then a traffic accident happened and took Mom away from us. Ever since then, my polite, well-mannered, loving dad changed into a cruel, bitter drunk who seemed to despise me. The next day, I arrived home from school with the worry about what state my dad would be in. But, why was Uncle Alfred on my doorstep? I invited him inside, and there was Dad, slumped on the couch, surrounded by empty beer cans. As soon as he saw us, he slurred out and started throwing the cans at us. Uncle Alfred then took me to dinner so we could have a talk, and I couldn't help the tears as I blurted out how bad things were at home. He patted my arm and said,
Your father's been through a lot. I think it's best if we give him time to sort himself out. I think you should come live with us for a while.
So that's how I ended up living with Uncle Alfred, Aunt Madeline, and my cousin Charity. At first, everything seemed fine. As bad as it sounds, it was a relief to be away from Dad and to be able to properly process my thoughts for once. I was so grateful to Uncle Alfred for giving me a second home. But then he went away on a business trip, and everything changed. I was walking back to my room when Charity appeared in her doorway and tripped me up. As I stumbled and landed on my hands and knees, she snorted out, Yes, that's right. Bow down to your queen, you hideous peasant. You should know your place in this house. Ugh, that girl was such a pain. Since her dad went away, she wouldn't quit tormenting me. It's ironic that her name is Charity, but she doesn't seem kind at all. I'd had enough of her cruel jibes. This had just got personal. So I angrily replied, I know you're just jealous of me because your grades suck and you're not as pretty. Charity's eyes welled up. Then she shoved past me and ran to her mom. I followed after her and explained what happened to my Aunt Madeline. She frowned at Charity, then scolded her. Phew. Fortunately, I had Aunt Madeline on my side. Anyway, justice is served, right? Wrong, as it wasn't long before my aunt's attitude changed toward me too. One time, I was helping my aunt cook a casserole when the doorbell rang. It turned out to be an old friend of my aunt. As soon as she saw me, she happily said, Wow, it's only been a few years, but Charity sure has grown up. The older she gets, the more she looks like Alfred, doesn't she? Look at her eyes and smile. I stared at Aunt Madeline in confusion and saw her mood immediately shift. That night when I brought the casserole dish out, Aunt Madeline took one bite, then spat it into a napkin. You're clumsy, thoughtless, and now an awful cook? Be a bit more useful, will you? I stared at her open-mouthed, unable to find the words to say. Then Charity piped in, Please, never make this again. Casserole is so gross. Just like you. Then she smirked at me as she dumped the entire plate into the trash. Weird. Didn't Aunt Madeline tell me to cook this because it was Charity's favorite? It seemed like life in this house wasn't going to get any easier. Over the next week, their mocking and snide comments continued. One day I styled my hair in a different way, and Charity snickered at me. What's that? It looks like you got a lobster on your head. Have you ever considered dyeing your hair, by the way? Because blonde really doesn't suit you. On another occasion, I was invited to a party, so I put on this cute dress, but when I walked downstairs in it, they both stared at me. My aunt said, Oh, dear, is that piece of rag making you look even chubbier than usual? Or is it because you've been so well fed living with us? Another time, I was sitting at the breakfast table, dabbing lip gloss onto my lips, when Charity yanked it off me. As I tried to grab it back, she sniggered out, What for? Putting this on your gross lips just makes you look desperate. No one wants to kiss you anyway. Gosh, my patience with this girl was wearing very thin. Worse still, Aunt Madeline overheard the whole thing, but she just laughed. I didn't understand why they were being like this. I knew I wasn't ugly or fat, and far from it. I know I'm pretty, as I was always complimented on my glossy long hair. Well, until I moved here, anyway. This was so confusing. Why were they jealous of me? It turns out that being too beautiful was not easy. Ugh. Things got trickier when my dad, who's also the school principal, returned to work after his time off. He totally ignored me, and it made me feel terrible. Then I arrived home from school to Aunt Madeline fussing over me and asking if I wanted anything to eat. Huh? What? Oh, I see. Uncle Alfred was back from his work trip. Ugh! It was time I exposed this mother-daughter duo's fake act once and for all. So that evening, I volunteered to cook. Yep, you guessed it. I made the casserole dish. As I brought it out, Charity accidentally shouted, "Ew! I already told you I hate this dish." Aunt Madeline turned pale, and Charity gave this gawping, shocked look. Then I dropped to my knees and pleaded, "I know I'm wrong. Please don't punish me anymore. I don't want to sleep in the basement again." Uncle Alfred looked very confused, so I continued. "I forgot that Charity hates this dish. I've been punished several times, but I still keep on messing up. I'm the one to blame." "What is this? I go away for a few weeks and come back to carnage?" He ordered Aunt Madeline into their room for a private chat. "We're not even related. Don't expect my mother and I to be nice to you," she said, then stormed off. What? What did Charity mean? Of course we were related. Aunt Madeline was my dad's sister, right? I wanted to know what was going on, so I hid behind the door and listened in on their conversation. "Tell me the truth. Theresa is your child with Claire, isn't she?" I was taken aback. Claire? My mother? Had I misheard her? "I know. Mark told me. The day Claire had the accident, they ran some blood tests, and he found out Teresa's blood type didn't match his. Obviously, she's not his biological daughter, and she looks just like you. Now tell me, did you and Claire cheat behind our backs? You used to be in love with her before you married me. So Dad treated me like that because he found out I'm not his own daughter? And Alfred and my mom used to be in love before she got married to my dad? Explain to me!" "Enough!" Alfred finally spoke up. "I have nothing to explain to you." Hearing footsteps toward me, I rushed to my room, closed the door, then crawled into my blanket pretending to be asleep. Suddenly, I heard the door open. It was Alfred. "Theresa, let's get out of here." I packed a bag and left with my Uncle Alfred. We moved into a small apartment not too far from his house. Even though he took care of me a lot, he never mentioned that day ever again. I didn't dare to ask either. So we just let it slide. He had to be my real dad, right? He just wasn't ready to talk about it yet. I tried to avoid Charity as much as possible, but this wasn't always easy as we went to the same school. It wasn't like I was scared of her or anything, it was just awkward. Then one day, I walked along the corridor to see flyers stuck to lockers, doors, windows, and floating around the floor. They all had a picture of my face on them, and scrawled across them was, "This fraud is the product of her cheating mom and a married man." Everyone was giving me dirty looks and whispering about me. I panicked and rushed out of there, but I wasn't looking where I was going and bumped straight into a jock, and standing next to him was Charity. "Enjoy the fame. These flyers were specially made for you." Right at that moment, my father appeared holding a flyer. He waved it in front of her. "What is this? Who allows you to trash the school with this rubbish? Leave Theresa alone." I couldn't cope with my father right now, so I ran off to class. That afternoon, I heard the school speaker announce that everything written on the flyers was lies, and Charity would be in detention. Once the last bell rang, I just wanted to get home and hide away from the world. But as I walked outside, I saw my dad waiting for me at the gate. I had nothing to say to him, so I ignored him and walked off. "Please, Theresa, at least hear me out." I stopped on the spot, then walked over to him. I guess it was time I found out the truth. So, turns out, yes, I'm not his daughter. But I wasn't Uncle Alfred's daughter either. "I found this, and it made me feel so guilty," he said. He showed me an artificial insemination certificate file. Turns out after years of trying, my parents went to run some tests, and my dad was diagnosed as infertile. Mom didn't want him to be upset, so she secretly got artificial insemination and gave birth to me. "It was never your mom's fault, and I was wrong to treat you like that. I'm
I'm so sorry.
A fresh ran of tears streamed down my face with each word I heard from him.
Theresa, I'm so sorry that us adults, selfishness and bitterness has hurt you.
Startled, I turned around to find that Uncle Alfred was already there behind me. I guess he'd come to pick me up, and I didn't notice since I was talking to my dad. He must have heard the whole story.
Alfred and I will do anything to make it up to you. Even if you want to find your biological dad, we'll try our best.
I looked at him and Uncle Alfred, thinking, there's no need to, as I've already got two amazing dads.